Hey folks, this is Vince with Dad's Gaming Addiction, and today we're going to take a very brief look at War and Chaos. Now this is a fantasy chess game that plays a little bit like chess, but it has its own rule set and can actually support up to 4 players. Now it's important to note that War and Chaos is currently being funded through the Kickstarter process, today being December 11th, 2013. This makes everything that you see here subject to change. So without further ado, let's just take a look at the components and see how the game is played. Alright, now as far as the components are concerned, my prototype copy came with one playing board. It's a 12 by 12 grid, though these corners appear to be out of bounds. The playing board also consists of this 2 by 2 center zone called the Chaos Zone, and some interesting things happen there in both the basic and advanced rule set, which I'll briefly touch on in a minute. The game also contains 64 tokens or playing pieces, and those are representative of the 4 different races in the game. This white set here are the humans, you've got elves over here, goblins, and finally the undead up here along the top. My prototype copy also came with a number of these sheets of paper, and these sort of serve as guides to help you get acclimated to the different races in the game. Now keep in mind that this is a prototype, so this is obviously or probably not the final copy that would be in the final version. But if you're completely new to chess, that's okay, because this guide actually contains a sheet for the standard chess battle plans, or basically the standard way to play the game of chess. You've actually got your pieces listed out here, how they move, how they attack. You've got your rules for castling here along the bottom, and this even covers en passant, which is something I haven't seen very often, even as an ex-professional chess player myself. So these basically will help you get acclimated to the different races in the game. Now, there are 2 different ways to play War and Chaos. There's the basic and the advanced way to play. The advanced version, or the advanced variant, you'll definitely want to look at these different sheets. There's one for each of the races. Each race has a set of different pieces, and they all move differently. So you'll definitely want to check these out just so that you don't get lost as far as what each piece does. In the basic game of War and Chaos, all you'll be doing is observing this particular sheet. The squires, for example, in the humans race will move exactly like pawns, just like the skeletons would. They would behave the exact same way as pawns. However, if you're playing the advanced game, the squires and the skeletons would have a slightly different rule set. Alright, now if you decide to play the basic game, you'll just set up the board the same way that you would chess. There is a starting zone that is outlined on each side of the board, and for the most part, the pieces are pretty self-explanatory as far as what counterpart they have with an actual game of chess. For example, you've got this paladin down here, which you can see is clearly writing something. That is indicative of the knight. As far as the other classes go, though, I don't know if I can zoom in on this or not, but you've got these goblins over here, you've got the warg rider, the undead have this shadow rider, and the elves have this centaur. Again, those are classes that appear to be riding something, so obviously those would be the knight class. And of course, the other pieces follow suit in that regard. Your bishops all represent some sort of shaman or priestess, something. It's kind of obvious. Once you get the board set up, and it's important to note that unlike in real chess, the queen is always to the right of the king. In the standard game of chess, the queen always goes on her own color, but in this case, the queen is always to the right of the king. Alright, now with that in mind, some other things to note about the basic game. The pieces, while they move in the same way as they do in a regular game of chess, the goal is not actually to checkmate the enemy king. In fact, there are 2 different victory conditions, and you can observe either or depending on what mood you're in. One of the victory conditions is simply to be the last king standing. In this game, you can actually take an opponent's king and the game not be over. That player would not be be eliminated from the game. They can continue playing as normal. The person with the last king standing will win the cut off the head victory condition. Or you can play the annihilate victory condition game, where you just simply be the last person standing and have the only tokens left on the board. Now let's talk about this Chaos Zone for a minute, and this applies to both the basic and advanced rule set. But in War and Chaos, pieces do not get promoted by moving to the other side of the board. Rather, this has two special effects. If a piece manages to remain in the Chaos Zone for one full round, that player will be allowed to perform a resurrection. Basically, they can sacrifice the piece that is currently in that zone and replace it with one that is currently dead. So basically, you're sacrificing one piece for the other. If a player manages to leave their piece in the Chaos Zone for 2 turns, full 2 rounds that is, the player can go ahead and promote that piece to whatever piece they want, sort of like if a pawn reached the other side of the board. So that's actually pretty interesting because the center of the board is where the most action is going to be. And that's going to be a prime real estate spot for all of the players, just simply because you could resurrect or promote pieces at will if you manage to control this part of the board. One final thing to note about the Chaos Zone, in the basic rule set, a player can sacrifice 3 of their pieces, just remove them from the board, to move any other piece onto any square in the Chaos Zone, even if there happens to be another piece at that location. So while that is a very powerful move, it's also pretty risky. Obviously, you're giving up 3 pieces just for the sake of getting 1 piece into the Chaos Zone. So it's highly situational and a little bit strategic, but it could actually prove effective, assuming that you play your cards right. The advanced game is slightly more complicated, and I won't go over everything here, but I will touch on the highlights. For one, each piece has its own way of moving. Pawns, for example, in the humans race will move differently than the pawns in the elves race. So you'll have to check out the sheets that I was showing you at the beginning of the video, just so that you can keep track of which piece does what. Another thing to consider is that each piece starts face down, and you can actually move these around when you're setting up your board. You can put the pawns in the back, the bishops over here, the rooks wherever, it doesn't matter. And that's actually part of the fun, because whenever a piece is face down and you go to move it, you have a choice. You can either flip it over, reveal it, and then move it as normal, or keep it face down, but it retains the properties and movement of a pawn. So you could sneak a queen of that race, for example, as a pawn up the board, and then when it gets in range of something, you could technically do a lot of damage if you play your cards right. So there's a little bit of strategic play there. One other thing to note, you only need to sacrifice 2 of your pieces in order to move another piece into the Chaos Zone. Now, the king in this game, you're still trying to do the same thing. You're trying to take all of the other kings on the board. However, you will have to hit the enemy king twice, unless you're attacking an enemy king with a king of your own or your queen. And there you have it. This is just a very brief look at the game War and Chaos. You can check out my written preview at www.dadsgamingaddiction.com, or you can simply click on the link in the below description. That'll take you there as well. Now, if you're interested in this game, I believe the game still has about 10 or 11 days left as of today's date. So if you like what you see here, feel free to click on the Kickstarter link below and support it. This is Vince. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.